Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CEA's Conversation webinar series. Canadian Electricity Association is the voice of the electricity industry in Canada. My name is Farhan Mirza, and I'm pleased to be your host for today's webinar. The Conversation series features presentations from CEA's corporate partners, and the series will highlight a variety of Canadian and international solutions to current and future challenges faced by the industry. Working with CEA's corporate partners, these webinars will have been developed to be of specific interest to those working in the electric utility space from generation through to the customer. For a list of upcoming sessions, check out CEA's website at electricity.ca. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items. Our session today is scheduled to run from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Questions can be asked, and we would encourage you to do so as they come up by typing them into the chat function. You can see that on your screen there. They're going to be asked throughout the presentation. A brief survey will be sent to webinar participants following the session today, and we very much appreciate your feedback and would love to hear about any topics you would like to see in the conversation series in the future. Please keep an eye out for future webinars and events through CEA's monthly newsletter, Current Affairs. With over 6,000 subscribers, Current Affairs is the place to go for Canadian industry news as we connect the national value chain from generation through to the customer. If you'd like to receive Current Affairs, you can subscribe to this free publication via CEA's website at electricity.ca. Today, PwC Canada will present our webinar on cybersecurity, understanding an OT attack. Cybersecurity has been identified as a top risk across the power sector and more broadly by critical infrastructure providers. But what does that mean? And how do we connect these broad and top management concerns to meaningful security systems and data to inform a risk-based action plan? During this webinar, our panelists will discuss how to secure cloud operations, talk about an anatomy of an OT attack and how to defend it. They will go over an in-depth security controls for mitigation and how organizations can design, build, and pilot a cybersecurity program supported by robust risk tools. At the end of today's discussion, we hope to leave you with a number of key takeaways. You will learn about designing, building, and piloting a cybersecurity program supported by robust risk tools and the ongoing monitoring of the program. You'll know the key drivers and considerations for cloud transformation, including privacy, compliance, and cybersecurity. You'll participate in a review of an OT cyber attack and learn defense in-depth security controls that should be in place to reduce an OT cyber risk. Joining us today for today's discussion from PwC Canada's Cybersecurity, Privacy, and Financial Crime team, our partner Richard Wilson, managers Dan Mara and Iman Hamad, and directors Puneet Daya and Chris Hunter. Welcome everyone to CEA's Conversation series. Richard, I'll pass it over to you to start us off.
Terrific, thanks Farhan, appreciate it. Hello everybody, welcome. Today we're going to dive into a good overview of understanding of an OT attack. And as my team and I really talked through this, we saw a broader set of the implications and controls that are around it. And so we're going to try to go through a number of those. And so we'll go into the anatomy of an OT attack, and we could spend an hour just on that topic or 2 hours alone. But we'll give you sort of a good anatomy of what we're seeing from some of our OT specialists. And then we're going to tie it into some of the other controls, like what role does cloud play in this? Is actually quite interesting. And then we'll take a look at the overall risk dialogue, and the risk as a capability in how you position your OT program and strategically position it up through to your board. Throughout, please ask questions, and then we'll have lots of Q&A at the end as well. So let's move ahead. Okay, a couple of quick thoughts just before we dive into this. We know that we've got both technical and non-technical audience members today. We're going to touch on both. So when we get into the technical topic, don't worry, it's not going to be all talking about AD and PLCs and a whole bunch of other multi-letter acronyms. We'll touch on both sides. This is not a sky is falling team, right? So this is not a fear-mongering conversation today. This is practical. It's about what can we actually do to understand the OT environment and to secure it better. In general, what we're seeing at the board and management level is that while board management teams aren't seeing that OT cyber risk is as low as they would ultimately like to see it and are targeting for, they know good work is happening by a lot of smart people. We see that. and we'll just encourage you to continue that work, and we'll give you some messaging to help manage those expectations and manage also the expectations that new threats are going to continue to happen. I mean, they continue to emerge. We'll always need to stay out ahead of those. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my clever panelists. Let's just go through a quick intro with that team. If we go to the next slide, I can turn it over to Chris to begin.
Thanks, Rich. You promised I could talk about AD and PLCs today. That's at least the PLCs part. That's part of the reason I'm here. Chris Hunter, I'm an electrical engineer. Spent all my career building, maintaining, and securing OT and ICS systems for both Canadian and global power sector clients. Spent the last 2 years at the PwC cyber team, helping to build out their operational technology security practice. Aman?
Thanks, Chris. My name is Iman Hamad. I am an electrical engineer by training. I come with 20 years of experience combining communication technology control and cybersecurity. I've been part of the industrial and IoT security team at PwC, focusing on critical infrastructure systems security and operational resilience. Thrilled to be here and looking forward to our communication discussion.
All right, Puneet here. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I work to lead our cloud security services practice. The background is technology. I've worked with clients across FS and power sector to help them enable secure cloud migration as they go through these journeys across APAC and North America, and looking forward to the chat today. Dan?
Nice one, Puneet. Hi, everybody. So Dan Mara here. I've got 7+ years practicing in the cybersecurity risk management space. So that's both designing the underlying risk models and also the accompanying governance models for implementation of each of those. And this has often supported a lot of the cybersecurity strategies that our clients have come up with over the last few years. Clients have stretched coast to coast in Australia, Canada, and also the United States, covering generation, transmission, distribution, as well as gas as well.
Terrific. Thanks, everybody. Okay, let's dive into it. Let's have some fun. So we've got a pretty busy slide here that Iman will just break down for us a little bit around the OT cyber threat landscape. Again, huge topic, but do you want to give us a quick summary on that, Iman?
Thanks, Rich. And yes, so if we are going to discuss today one example of an OT attack, let's get a view of what we are up against. So to understand what's happening out there, so this slide presents a summary of cyber incident events targeting the power sector in 2019. And if we select one example, we will see, for example, in North America and the US, in September 2019, several utilities were targeted by a malware, look-back malware. That's just one example. And digging deeper into these several incidents, we see a trend. So this trend translates to the top threats that we're looking at in the power sector. At number one, we're looking at ransomware. And this will be informative for the OT attack example that we will discuss in a few minutes. This is followed by phishing activity, and phishing activity is just the initial threat actor's set of actions to proceed to either plant a ransomware or to breach the data in the power system corporate. Finally, as we know, power sector is mainly targeted by threat actors that are determined and informed. So this will usually causing targeted disruptions in these utilities or facilities. With that in mind, we would like to get a better understanding of why is this still happening. And a good lens into that will be discussed by Chris. Over to you, Chris.
Sounds good. Thank you, Iman. Again, a lot of information on this slide. What this is intending to show through the work that we've done with operational technology and IT security and OT security teams over the last few years in Canada, we see that the high and medium impact cyber assets they get all of the, or the majority of the, security resources when we look at OT and OT security. The intent of this is to show that, the bulk of the focus is, of course, focused on securing the bulk electric system and the systems and assets that support that bulk electric system, primary control centers, cross-border HVDC systems, provincial interties. As we move a little bit to the right, the regulatory frameworks do provide some guidance across, lower impact to the electric system, some of the renewable generation facilities that are growing, more of the the MV and HV stations, some of the distribution management systems. It's still a fair amount of attention and focus. Today I don't want to talk a lot about these two. I think most organizations have done a great job in building out security around these high value key assets. The area that doesn't get enough attention, and in some cases doesn't get any attention, or they're not sure who's supposed to provide the attention, is as we move further to the right of this. So there is a fair amount of assets that that are still ICS, operational technology assets, that are not regulated by the bulk electric system requirements. So saying that, those assets are not, they're not regulated by the broader system operators, but they still could be extremely valuable and actually have a large impact on power sector organizations. So just because it's not a regulatory push, it does not mean that these assets and systems do not have high value and a huge impact if something happens to them. We'll get into this a little bit further in the discussion as Dan dives into this, is to figure out how you can tackle this. There is no regulatory framework. It's too exhaustive to use the medium and high standards to meet some of these. The concern and what we're seeing is also in this other technology category, this bucket is growing. When we talk about organizations moving into broader analytics platforms, working towards asset maintenance and asset management, working on getting a smarter grid. Is it OT? Is it IT? Puneet's going to get into some stuff a little bit later when we throw some of the data or some of the analysis, or some of the cloud tools, I'll call them. That creates a gray area as well. So the intent of this is just to give a bit of a footprint on large technology landscape. Yes, in some areas there's been great work that's been done, but there's huge parts of the technology footprint that is not getting the attention it needs. And we'll dive into what does it look like to tackle all of this forgotten or lost technology. They're maintained, people use the technology, but when it comes to security and securing those technologies, that's what we're trying to focus on. How do we get into the ones that really aren't driven by the regulatory frameworks, and making sure that organizations are protected and can put a program in place that meets the balance of reducing cyber risk, but also understanding that cost and effort is always a factor in figuring out that right balance. Next, we'll take a quick walk through, as the title of the discussion today presents itself. We'll talk through what a cyber attack looks like, for an operational technology set of systems. For those that are fluent on the different approaches, you'll recognize that this takes the cyber kill chain methodology. It is a good approach to walk through where could there have been better controls in place to stop this, and what went wrong and why things went wrong. So this particular event that we're going to talk about, this is a fairly sophisticated threat actor. They were looking for financial gain, so they had financial motivations. They targeted and understood that public IPPs, although may not have the same level of requirements because they're not bound by the medium and high requirements, still have a significant impact on the power system and the power grid. So they did some research. They dug around to identify through through LinkedIn some folks that were protection and control technologists, worked for small companies, established a connection with one of the PNC techs, impersonated a recruiter started transferring, emails to start a dialogue about maybe a position that was a little bit more lucrative for this contractor. As we work through the the discussions, once those files are transferred, that's when the foothold is established. So the threat actor did get access to the the laptop that the contractor would use for work, and did establish remote access. So at that point, the threat actor had the ability to transfer files. Basically, payloads were able to be transferred to that that mobile laptop. Next up, as time progressed, the threat actor kept monitoring. Okay, what exactly is this individual doing? And lo and behold, the individual had the ability to remotely connect to several facilities using his own asset. I was able to actually connect with this asset, both locally on corporate at some of these sites, but also on the ICSS, on the ICS networks as well. So as we work through the the steps of the situation, laptop's infected, contractor has physical access and has remote access using his own his own laptop into these. The threat actor is starting to get a much better view of what technologies this individual has access to, start digging around to find some of the vulnerabilities. Talk a little bit about, jump on the next step here, Iman.
Thanks, Chris. That's fascinating. So now our contractor has been exploited and somebody is acting through him on our network. Next step, they will, after exploration and understanding the environment and getting to the target assets, they look deeper into the assets and understand which ones are more exploitable, which ones have weaknesses. And these weaknesses are not surprising. It's either an older operating system, unpatched system, or an end-of-life PLC. So they mark their actual targets now. And they, for example, in this scenario, let's consider an unpatched Windows domain controller. They will infect with the malware. And in the next step, they will establish the backdoor communication to the remote command and control servers. Once that is established, then the ransomware is actually deployed directly through that connection to the endpoints and the core systems. So far, we have no indication as the operator of what's going on, and then the screen appears once the encryption starts occurring and the file systems and the backups are looked out. We get an indication, and then, Chris, what will happen?
Yeah, and great steps through, Iman. And I think the as this progresses, in this case, the threat actor identified and was able to deploy across several facilities around the same time. As I mentioned earlier, the intent in this case was financial. So there were enough mechanisms in place to shut down these facilities in an organized, safe manner. What they did go after was, they knew and they did, leak to the media that this was happening. Several of these producing facilities had to shut down, as the backups were also only kept locally. They were also encrypted. It took a while to stand the systems back up. So they did go after, the share price obviously was going to take a hit. Price of power, even though these weren't, core to the system, did bump up the price of power at the power pool, and they did go after a ransom. That was kind of the third and kind of their last piece of it. I think one of the important things to look at on this is this doesn't happen over 3 or 4 days. This is a very long process. Targets are identified, research is done. This could be 6, 8, 9 months in duration, and multiple victims that they would pursue, and pursue the ones that actually turn out to be successful.
Fantastic. Okay. So no shortage of insights around that, and obviously it's a very complex process that we see happen. So why don't we now do a bit of a transition to Puneet, and I think what we're going to do is talk a little bit about I guess the component around cloud adoption. We've obviously seen within the power sector quite a significant shift moving in the use of cloud, both in IT and OT. And so Puneet, why don't you dive into that a little bit? Give us a sense of, how is it affecting asset management or, applications, things along those lines. just a note to the audience, we're going to go a little bit more technical on this one, and then we're going to bring it back to some business logic with Dan. So if Puneet gets a little bit more technical, have faith, we'll come back to a business discussion as well.
Sure, Rich, and thanks, Chris and Iman. So, excuse me, IT and OT integration has been well underway last several years to increase distribution system performance, reliability, and improve customer satisfaction. Now enter cloud. So cloud adoption in power sector has further blurred the demarcation and is poised to accelerate the IT-OT convergence. Application portfolios are getting hybrid with significant SaaS uptake, as well as a lot of core business applications and OT services, the DAS asset management, performance analytics, AMI headings, GIS, historians finding their way to the cloud. It's actually a three-dimensional integration now with enterprise, OT, and cloud. That puts customer and operational data at risk if it's not secured properly. So what we are seeing is a lot of clients in power sector now adopting and embracing a zero trust cybersecurity strategy, since being inside the network is no longer considered a default trust. So the security delivery approach now needs to be completely reimagined in this new evolving converged world, left shifting and actually embedding guardrails within the cloud delivery lifecycle. In fact, cloud actually presents opportunities to automate some of the traditional IT/OT controls, such as network isolation, secure remote access, default encryption, and real-time asset and posture visibility. Now, one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, what are the top challenges from a security standpoint when it comes to cloud, given that cloud is now beginning to take hold in power and utilities. Next slide. Now there are a lot of challenges and opportunities when it comes to cloud in power sector, but I'll just talk to the top 3 or 4 here real quick and share some insights. First and the foremost, I think a lot of us would have seen the shared responsibility model. So the top of the list challenge that we have seen is, how do you ensure security governance in a multi-cloud shared responsibility model? Now, as I said, a number of IT and OT services are moving to cloud. CIS, your SAP workloads, a lot of data and analytics workloads. Security governance has been a consistent challenge in a multi-provider shared responsibility delivery model. And the complexity that is introduced is really because now the security is not only a shared responsibility between the cloud provider and the client, but also between different security stakeholders, whether it is the platform engineering, the security function, enterprise architecture, and even an IT and OT project teams. So what we are seeing clients is having to redesign their target operating model to balance the need for business agility with functional independence to manage cyber risk in cloud. The next one is the next slide, please. The next one on the list is, how do you ensure consistent security control implementation in a multi-cloud ecosystem? Now the challenge is the cloud strategy for most clients is multi-provider. And how do you ensure, given that, as you can see, each of the cloud platform providers have got a number of their own native security services, as well as a number of other multi-provider security technologies. There is this situation of tool sprawl, with cloud provider and security vendors releasing new set of security capabilities for their platform. The choice and conflict of platform native versus multi-provider security technologies has been seen introducing risk, especially as some of these are turned on without fully operationalizing and governing, giving clients a false sense of security. To resolve this challenge, we have seen some clients adapting and and adopting a cloud control matrix approach, which is aligned with within their cybersecurity framework with platform-specific implementation guidance. Now, I'll switch gears a little bit and where things start getting a little more technical. So next slide. The number 3, and this is big. Almost a lot of cloud breaches can actually be traced back to misconfigurations in cloud environment. So configuration drifts in a volatile environment. Now with DevOps in cloud, resource and application configuration changes are happening all the time through continuous build and release cycles. It is actually hard to tollgate changes in such a volatile environment. Now misconfigurations that slip through, and there are multiple of those, as you can see here, are misconfigurations that slip through our security team's worst nightmare. There have been breaches with millions of sensitive records exfiltration, account takeovers, and even complete host compromises. It is important security validations are embedded as guardrails at each stage of your deployment pipelines. And just like infrastructure and application, security policy deployment also happen through security pipelines. Next slide, please. So where does the people aspect factor into this? I think another big challenge is how do you future-proof the cybersecurity teams? The cloud is the future to realize digital transformation ambitions. Nobody is disputing that anymore. Security teams across industries and more so in power and utilities are now actually playing catch up to technology and platform engineering groups. Based on our own PwC's annual Canadian Digital Survey released recently, cloud solution, as you can see, sits right at the top of this list of emerging technologies, with 44% of business and technology leaders identifying this as a known gap in the organization. There is an immediate need to augment capacity and upskill cybersecurity workforces in a number of areas. And we have sort of classified those in 4 core buckets. We already saw platform native security skills, whether it is the kind of platform, SaaS, ISPS that you're using, the cloud provider native technologies there, containers and serverless security, because more and more workloads are taking a microservices architecture and also getting serverless. DevSecOps integration is big because you want to integrate controls within the pipeline rather than having an after-the-fact security monitoring and compliance reporting. And of course, multi-cloud technologies, whether it is your HashiCorp Vault technologies, whether it is deploying infrastructure as code through Terraforms, or even in native ISC tools. The security actually needs to be embedded into the pipeline to make sure that consistent security controls are enforced through the pipelines and not when the infrastructure and the resources get deployed. So there is the need for left shifting and ensuring that security is baked into the pipeline. And the approach would essentially help manage a lot of cyber risks. And my colleague Dan is just going to talk to you about some cyber security risk management best practices in power and sector. Over to you, Dan.
Cool. Thanks very much, Puneet, and thanks so far, Rich, Chris, Aman, and Puneet for all the efforts here. So basically, everybody, I'm going to be talking through the typical sort of steps, basically, that we would go through normally to formulate a cybersecurity strategy based on all these different things that we've been talking about so far. So I might just ask a presenter to jump to the next slide here, and I'm gonna. It's a lot of information and a little bit busy. So just home in on sort of step number 1 there, and we can we'll get started there and just work our way through it. So basically, up front, it's going to be really important that when you're thinking about baking risk as a capability into your strategy, you're going to need to identify your VP level personnel and their immediate reports and get them included right at the start, right? You need to be asking them, what systems matter to you and your BU the most. And it's not necessarily going to just be, the things that are in NERC high or NERC medium, as Chris was alluding to before, right? There's a lot of non-NERC, NERC low, and and if you're a gas pipeline as well, it's not going to apply, right? So you need to understand and get an idea on that. Don't assume that those that are actually responsible for administrating technology are going to be the individuals responsible for accepting risk. They're two separate things, right? So that's why it's really, really important to engage with those folks, operators and parts of the business that actually rely on the technology to support their key processes. Because what you'll find is a lot of power sector companies are concerned with keeping the lights on, maintaining a culture of safety, fostering employee growth and satisfaction. There's a much broader sort of remit of systems really that are out there that are going to be needed to support the achievement of the key processes that support those corporate objectives. So the other thing too is if you don't start talking to them now, when you start bringing, a security architecture or drawings to them in steps 5 and 6 later on there, it's going to be pretty tricky to get that buy-in. So step number 1, identify those folks and start talking to them. Moving over to step 2 there. So vulnerabilities and controls need to be understood after we've worked out what's important to the business. The power sector companies, gas sector as well, their supporting infrastructure can vary substantially. And I think if you just take Puneet's point, right? We've got cloud getting hooked up to, unregulated assets, right? The list of vulnerabilities is going to be very different if you're talking about those that are in your highly regulated assets. So you can pull your trusty frameworks, draw on your NIST and your ISO 27002, whatever framework you typically align to. And go through those lists to sort of make sure that you've got a broad sort of idea of what your system exactly is and where those vulnerabilities and concerns might start arising. Over to step 3, governance, definitely the most exciting topic of all time. So this is going to be really, really important, right? It's very rare to see a future state of cybersecurity that can actually be sustained with the existing resources that you have, okay? So start thinking about what org changes are going to be needed to support the new security roles and provide the right level of oversight to those folks to see them being held accountable for the security objectives they're responsible for. Typically what we start seeing here is, as I said before, the business owners, so those VPs are going to have a role in their direct reports. Typically it's around setting the impact of the risk events that we're reporting on. Tech owners as well, so those folks might be engineering, responsible typically for likelihood reduction, stopping the event actually occurring. You're also, to manage the risk function, going to need probably a risk person as well as a security architect. And bear in mind, those folks need to get along. You might be bringing a risk person, a technology person, an engineer together. Very different backgrounds, very different personalities, very, very different ideas on what's typically important. So just bear in mind, you might need to have a bit of a kumbaya.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Dan. Rich, Dan, we get along all the time.
That's right.
Our priorities are always aligned.
That's right. Yeah, kumbaya. Absolutely.
Kumbaya every day of the week, guys. So on to step 4 there. So you see those dots on the heat map there, like here's the thing, getting that down to a subset, the list that you kind of needed to get it to, is a tricky thing. You think back to that kill chain slide that Aman and Chris were speaking earlier on. Step number 7 is actually the concern. The kill chain before that should not be represented on this heat map. If you start taking vulnerability, scans, pen test results, lists that are thousands of pages long with all these concerns, if you will, about cybersecurity for your OT environment to the executives and the board, if there's a desire to roll this up to the board, and to many companies out there, we would encourage that to be the case. They're going to go to sleep, their eyes will glaze over, or they'll have a sky is falling moment and start having allergic reactions, and you're going to have a bad time, right? So what you need to do is get yourself a risk model that adequately takes and considers all of that detailed weed information and pumps it up to these sort of heat maps that you see here, right? Which is a language that executives and boards speak in every single day of the week. It's pretty straightforward. Current state, target state. Dots on the heat map, what do we need to do to get those dots down? You got to be getting those dots down. You hear it all the time when it comes to executives and managing risk. Step 5 and 6, this is where you're going to see your risk person that we spoke about in step 3 there, and your security architect really coming together here. So they're basically going to be working out what are all those vulnerabilities, what are all those concerns, what can we do that's practical to get those dots into a more manageable state using the risk model that we designed in step 4. They're going to need to consider alternatives. So they're going to have a mind of query and openness to consider different sort of things, right? You might have an OT environment and you can't necessarily drop in, firewalls, or, you can't, we know the issues around patching in a lot of these environments. So how could you perhaps segment them and automate that in the meantime? Lots of different ways you can sort of swing the seesaw there, but it's going to be important there to have alternatives, because when we start moving on to step 7 there, that's when we've got our alternatives all sort of pulled together, and someone's going to have to pay for it. Right, so start thinking about CapEx, OpEx, whether the people that are going to be operating this future state are going to be in-sourced or whether they're going to be a service provider, right? This is when all those decisions start happening, and often it's not super easy, right? Because the executives might want to see those black dots move down to the blue dot zone up in step 4, but they can only forward the budget to go halfway or maybe even a quarter of the way in many instances. So, on to step 8, we're almost there, guys. Bear with me. So once
Dan,
it's all been agreed upon, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead, man.
When are you gonna tell me when are you getting the highway on my threat actor?
Yeah, exactly, right? I don't know. So develop a security execution plan and roadmap. You guys, this is not rocket science. Just go pull out your project management frameworks. Most organizations have got one: time, quality, scope, and budget. You've got your streams that are going to get you to that state that's articulated in section 6, just over there. And you've got executive and management and business ownership buy-in, because they understand those heat maps that have been illustrated them in step 4 there. Nice and easy. Just, right. Yeah, so make sure you...
Dan, I want to reinforce that. This is huge. You're right. It isn't rocket science, because you followed the sequence, the logical sequence of events up front, right? And we've seen some teams that go from the assessment to bringing the roadmap into their executive team, and the executive doesn't see the logic and why we need to spend so much money, or what resources you need, or what sequence you're doing. That part's been missed. So, the steps 3 to 6 there really help to provide the OT leadership team with a sound reason why they're asking for certain resources and why it'll take a certain amount of time to execute. Critical.
I think too, which, one of the biggest steps in here is 7, which we continue to push. It's when we talk resources, when it comes to people, that's such a key piece that I think we see time and time again in OT. Rich, there needs to be almost a bit more of a focus that not all of the issues identified can be solved with tools and technology. It's making sure that we appreciate there's going to be efforts going to be needed, and that might not exist right now. And then, it's a key piece that usually at least helps to bridge some of the gaps between the security risk people and some of the folks that use and rely on the operational technologies.
Yeah, Chris, just to soak that final thought. Personally, I'm tired of people kind of flinging spears saying IT and OT aren't getting along. I mean, that story is getting really old. The reality is that the vast majority of teams we're working with have a very strong interest in making sure that collective effort works out. And the reason that this was designed was to provide a platform for those teams to actually agree on the level of risk, agree on what controls can and can't be used in an architecture. And so it isn't that there isn't this integration. It's that there isn't necessarily a process underlying some of the work that the IT and OT teams are doing with security that allows them to articulate it, in a fairly simple way for management to understand. So that was the genesis behind us doing this type of thing.
And another thought, Richard and Dan here, this will not introduce significant delays in trying to control or strengthen the security controls, right? It just provides a structural, methodological way to address the risks at the right point. So if we go back to our threat actor and the scenario that we just talked about, through this process, we will identify, for example, addressing the network security weaknesses, and that will handle the threat landscape that we are considering at this period of time.
Yeah. A comment just came in from one of the attendees, which I really like, which was, if I stop moving my window, it might actually appear for me. Come back, there we go. Which is executives acknowledge cyber risk is a high priority, but it isn't truly reflected in the governance structure or even in the process. And so I think that we're, if we're going to have one takeaway on messaging the need for OT, if you go up to the executive team and they don't resource you properly, either through insourcing or co-sourcing or budgetarily, what they'll ask you to do is just take some controls out. What you actually need to do is show them, make the linkage between number 4 and number 7, which is no problem. If we can't put the rationale in our rate case or whatever for a certain amount of budget, then we have to accept a higher risk level. It's not that we just don't do certain projects. It's you actually need to look at the implications of a lesser budget in the risk profile. When you have that dialogue, the whole OT security dialogue changes. And so that to us has been probably one of the most constructive ways to get the conversation going. Let's see now, are we at the point, I guess, where we could start to entertain some more questions? Happy to do so, and I know that our moderators are going to drop some in. Yeah, Dan, why don't you sort of do a quick wrap maybe in the next 60 seconds, and then let's turn to questions. So I'll put a call out to our attendees. If you've got questions, start to submit, and we'll take them from there.
Sure thing, team. And I think, thanks for that, Richard. I'd say these are typically some of the vulnerabilities that you're going to be seeing that are going to contribute to some of those dots identified in step 4 there. So these are pretty typical that you'd see in an OT environment, particularly if it's not a NERC high or medium sort of site. If we move on to the next slide there as well, the outcomes of a lot of the preliminary risk assessments that we do indeed perform. So I did see a question as well about that one. So just stressing that, yeah, we do actually undertake this activity at a lot of clients. We typically see the NERC or those regulated assets down in that sort of more green and yellow zone. Impact can still be quite major, but the level of, I guess, rigor around a lot of the cybersecurity components for those assets pretty good. So you can get those dots down. Up in that top right corner where you're non-regulated, non-NERC and what have you, that's where a lot of the residual or current risk often sits that we see when we get out and get our hands dirty with a lot of the OT infrastructure.
Right. And Dan, these ranges that you have here come from not just obviously one client for confidentiality reasons, but this is actually a sort of an amalgamation of assessments that you've done across the OT environment, Canada, US in the last year or two. Is that how you'd characterize it?
That's about right. Yep, I'd say further up in the top right corner for Australia. So props for Canada for beating Aussie.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah, I'd say as well there, essentially moving into, this is a neat sort of little slide here that helps illustrate, I think, more the point that you were just speaking to, Rich, right? It's that risk acceptance process. So if you have got $1 million, but you need $2 million to do what you want to do, to move those dots around, consider how you might reduce the implementation effort that's illustrated over on the left of this graphic here, to potentially reduce a bit of the risk reduction that's illustrated on the horizontal or the x-axis, as a sort of basically a compromise, right? So you don't need to do the nth degree on everything, but you do need to get started and do something, right? So if you do have restricted budget, you can slide those sort of projects up and around and down based on what you've got in scope to try and fit the budgets that you have. But bear in mind, moving these sort of projects around that are illustrated here is going to affect the end state of where your risk dots end up on those heat maps. And it might be a little further up, but ultimately that is what the executives and the board and the business does need to accept if there's issues with dollars and headcount and what have you. So just a bit of a slide to illustrate and really drive that point home there.
Okay, terrific.
We can move on to some questions now if you like, team.
Sounds great. Okay. So we'll put the call out. If anybody has either a question or a comment, more than happy to reflect on either.
While we wait there, Rich, did you want to make a bit of a comment around that recent, the Canadian government, report that was provided on, some of the top threats that, I was surprised to see some of the ones, I guess, that were called out for Canada. Anything from your perspective that jumped out on that?
Actually, the questions are coming in fast and furious, Chris. So hold that thought, or maybe you can bake your response into to some of the questions. Okay, so a question here is, does it make sense to perpetuate the old adage of keeping OT and IT strictly separated? Or is it now time that we consider the gray areas and see how we best can support convergence? I'm happy to farm this one out or take a first stab. Does anybody feel passionate and want to start off with this?
I could jump on that one, Rich.
Sure, Chris, go for it.
I think one of the concepts that we talk a lot about is the concept of defense in depth, and I've got a bit of a different perspective when we talk, from an OT background. I would say that the IT piece of that was integrated with OT many years ago. So the second we started using Windows machines inside of power plants or inside of operating facilities, Windows servers instead of Unix servers, running the big EMS and SCADA systems. The challenge that we see is a lot of the applications that need to run on those IT machines, they cannot keep up with the level of updates and patches, and a lot of it driven by security these days, that Windows and some of the core infrastructure, even on the networking side, that they usually run. So the challenge with the integration pieces, we look at it this way, is we need to make sure that in some cases we leverage a lot of the good capabilities, but we do have to be cognizant that we will never be able to, I'll say, execute to the same level of maturity the controls that you would on IT. So unfortunately, there's going to be some assets and systems where we really have to strengthen, I'll call it the perimeter, and how people have basically access to those. Just because the concept of putting in a common vulnerability management program, for example, it's still a long ways out. Some of the technologies on the OT side they cannot keep up with the changes that some of the vendors provide.
Okay, terrific. I want to introduce a question around both board and management reactions to to the OT risk profile. Is it a surprise to see how high the risk is, and what are their concerns around bringing that risk down? I'll chime in on that one to start with, just given some of the board-facing discussions that I've had, and then open it up as well. So we've certainly had a couple of interesting examples where the message that came up to the board around OT risk and the threats that are related to it, the board might have taken a false sense of security, because what was being talked about was a couple of controls that may be effective, as opposed to the full risk profile. So when Dan showed that heat map, that's actually looking at the combination of all controls and defense in depth within OT. And so it's often a little unsettling for management teams and boards, frankly, to see what the risk level looks like, which is, oh my goodness, it's up in the possible to probable category. And so a couple comments. Dan, you and I have wrestled with this one. You have to also factor in the intent, which is, how likely is it that somebody has the intent to do this? If you're sitting in a high conflict country, it's probably higher than if you're sitting in Canada, but that doesn't mean we ever rest on our laurels. What we found is that helping boards to understand the full risk spectrum of OT sooner than later is very healthy. If they have a false sense of security, then actually what will end up happening is they can't execute their fiduciary duty. They won't release the funding that you may need necessary in order to conduct the appropriate security work. because they think that the risk is lower than it may actually be. So for those reasons, we suggest get a proper risk assessment done for your OT environment, and bring the truth forward, because it's they tend to want to just get down to business and get things addressed once they understand what the risk profile looks like.
Yeah, it's one where it's really important to stay close to them and be their ally, I think, on that journey as well, Rich. You do need to clarify those really key assumptions. A lot of the discussion we've had in our risk models has been, do we assume someone is trying? Who is the threat actor? And there's not a lot of data out there to say how many people are actively trying to hack your organization right now. So there is a bit of fuzzy logic to it at times, which can be frustrating, particularly for, I think, a lot of the operations and engineering folks that often sit higher up in organizations that are after very clear-cut results. So bringing them on that journey, not being an outlier as well. So holding their hand a little bit, to sort of put it bluntly, really, is that this is so common to see those risks up in that top right corner, like in this day and age right now. There's, aside from those OT NERC regulated risks like we talked about, they're usually pretty good, but up in the top right corner is not uncommon. And helping your board and executives understand that they're not alone can also really, really help sort of keep them calm, cool, and collected, and have that action-oriented mindset for sure.
Okay. There was a question, the caveat is we're not here to promote any PwC services, so I want to stay strongly committed to that. But there was a question around, whether we're conducting cybersecurity reviews for the power sector to identify gaps. And I know that certainly Chris, you, Dan, Iman, you've been in the heart of these conversations. So we certainly do that. The question is, can you talk about what are some of the best practices for having a good, healthy, open, transparent dialogue? Not as an auditor, but just as a team that is reviewing the OT environments. How do those conversations go? What works well? Is there any nervousness around it? What have you learned over the past couple of years of doing these? Chris, I'll start with you.
I think there's one of the things I'll bring up that stood out to me as we talked through this, Rich, is the team we've got on the panel today. I'm an engineer. My background is not risk. My background is not management consulting or audit that PwC would typically do. You've got a specialist like Dan. You've got Iman's background as well across a broad variety. I think what we've learned is, to be blunt, you can't walk into a room with folks that look after operations and look after operational technology and start asking a lot of hardcore, deep IT security questions. The conversation just doesn't go anywhere because you're not necessarily speaking on the same level. So I think it is very important, and you talk through this, Dan. It's understanding the stakeholders, and it's understanding who the important people are that are going to need to go along with this journey. Get them involved early, because if you're not going to get any buy-in, you're not going to have any success in it. So I think we've learned a lot, Rich, to understand really who the stakeholders are, and making sure that we've got the right level of discussions to have with those key folks, because it's a variety, and it is very different than typically tackling IT security.
And yeah, and to add to that, I think we have learned through the years that bringing both the stakeholders from IT and OT in the same room as we do risk profiling or the assessment of gaps to complement that view. And that does two things. First, it informs our assessment, but it starts that communication and dialogue within the organization. And many organizations found that useful. And the other thing that's interesting in the way that you bring a multifaceted team to do these audits is that you kind of take this assessment as a teaching moment. And we try to be sincere and transparent about when we find a gap, it's not just something that we put on paper. We try to understand why the gap is there. If it's a resourcing problem, it's the people or process or technology, and try to highlight really doable actions that they can do to achieve quick wins. So we try to be on their side, saying these are the small steps that you can start with as you build in a stronger strategy or a risk management program.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to one final question, then I know we need to go to wrap, which is from an organizational hierarchy structure, what can a small to medium-sized company do if cybersecurity is under the control of the CIO instead of a dedicated security-based executive? You know, and this is the absolute reality, you know, within our Canadian environment, and we've seen it be quite successful. Now, so I almost want to read through, you know, read in between the lines on that question, which is, you know, that implies that maybe it's not, you know, moving as forward as smoothly as one might hope as a result of that. So, you know, we do believe that there's a merit in having some separation of duties, in that security should have a relative amount of independence versus the overall technical organization, IT or OT. But if that's not possible, it doesn't mean you can't set up some processes and some governance that at least allows for a discrete security discussion, you know, that is not necessarily just influenced by IT as a whole. You know, in that case, in the in-source, co-sourced, outsourced model, what we've seen is you can co-source or sometimes even, you know, outsource that security role to come in and provide, you know, without a significant amount of cost, a good independent security eye that can look objectively at what security is required rather than what security can we do given our current IT, you know, architecture and infrastructure. You have to look at it separately from that. So those are a couple of good practices we've seen. Puneet, final comment from you?
Yeah, Rich, I would just put a bit of cloud spin to that. In fact, not the fact that cloud security, especially cloud security engineering, has traditionally been a separate function. Now, what we are seeing now is, to ensure the agility, we are seeing a lot more of cloud security engineering team, especially working closely with platform engineering teams, the infrastructure team, and that's just even in the absence of a dedicated security function. As you said, yeah, we definitely need to ensure that there is a separation of duties, even if the reporting hierarchy is the same. I think the alignment is more in terms of how cyber risk or cloud adoption risks they get captured, and even in an absence of a dedicated security function, you can still have the security engineering team with a bit of governance overlay to make sure that those risks are identified and reported. And we are seeing that as almost as a pretty prevalent practice.
Good stuff. Okay. I know we're just at the top of the hour here, so I think it's probably the appropriate time to say thank you to everybody and to turn the panel back to Farhan.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody, and to Chris, Dan, Puneet, Iman for that excellent, very relevant discussion. And Richard as well, thank you so much for moderating today's panel. That brings today's session to a close. And folks, that was our final webinar of 2020 for our CEA Conversation series. But keep in mind, we will be back next year with more webinars and events in 2021. All of those can be found on our monthly newsletter, Current Affairs. You can also find information on that in our news and events section on our website, which is again, www.electricity.ca. In closing, again, I would like to thank our panelists from PwC Canada and each of you for joining us today for our conversation series. Wishing you all a safe and joyous holiday season. We'll see you next year. Bye for now.